The market was hot under the twin suns. Metal roofs rattled in the wind, and the smell of dust and smoke filled the air. Jack, a human drifter, sat near his old ship, his hands greasy as he worked on a broken engine part. He was not a man of riches, not a man of power, just a wanderer who fixed things for food and fuel. Most aliens in the bazaar ignored him. A human meant trouble, a human meant danger, yet he minded his own work. Then he felt a small hand grip his arm, weak but desperate when he looked down. He saw a little alien girl, no older than 10, her skin pale silver with glowing lines under her eyes. Her big eyes were wet with tears, and her voice shook as she cried, "Please, mighty human. The Iron Nomads took my mother. You're my last hope. Save her." The bazaar fell silent at those words. Merchants stopped their trades. Eyes looked away and a heavy silence spread. Everyone knew the name Iron Nomads, slavers, raiders. Killers who rode iron machines across the wasteland. No one dared speak against them. No one dared to fight. Jack froze, his chest tight. He had heard of the Nomads too. Whole villages burned, families torn apart. The girl's grip did not loosen. She begged again, her voice cracking. They dragged her away. "I saw it, please. You're human. You can fight them. Please save her." Her words cut deep, and though Jack wanted to tell her no, something inside him stirred. He saw fear, but he also saw hope, and that hope was pointed only at him. Around them, the crowd turned away, pretending not to hear. A merchant muttered, "Foolish child. Asking him means death." Another hissed, "Do not say their name. The Nomads have spies," but the girl would not let go. Her little hands trembling but strong. Jack knelt down, wiping grease from his hands, and asked softly, "What's your name?" "Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra." Jack looked into her eyes and saw something he had not seen in a long time. Trust. Blind, desperate trust. He wanted to push her away, to walk off, to tell her he was no hero, but his heart refused. For once he could not walk. He asked, "Where did they take her?" Lyra pointed past the market walls, toward the endless desert dunes, the wastelands. "They took all the villagers there. I followed, I hid, I saw them. My mother is still alive." Jack's jaw tightened. He knew the wastelands. No one came back from them. The Iron Nomads rode massive steel beasts, their armor scarred from countless raids. They ruled the sands with fear, and no army dared fight them. But this little girl, small as she was, had chased them alone, and now clung to him as if he was her only chance. Jack felt the weight of her hope pressing down, and his hands shook. "I'm no soldier," he muttered half to himself. "I'm just a man with a broken ship." But Lyra's tears fell on his arm, and her voice was barely a whisper now. "Please. You're all I have left." The market went back to its noise, but Jack could feel the cold eyes watching. He knew if he said yes, the Nomads would come for him. They always came for those who stood against them. Still, he could not shake the memory of her small, trembling hand, and the way her voice carried through the silence. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the ground, and Jack stood. He looked at his broken ship, then at Lyra, and finally at the desert horizon. His chest ached with the choice before him, run or fight. Hide or step into a storm no man could survive. Lyra's eyes locked on his, wide and shining, waiting for an answer. For the first time in many years, Jack felt something burning inside him, purpose. And though his voice was low, every word carried weight. "Show me where," he said. Lyra's tears broke into relief, her face lighting up. She nodded fast. Clutching the pendant at her neck, she whispered, "Thank you, mighty human. Thank you." Jack almost laughed at the words. He did not feel mighty, he felt tired, broken and lost, but now, under the dying suns, with a little girl holding his sleeve, he felt the beginning of something he could not explain. The crowd still whispered, afraid. Merchants muttered curses, warning that he had just doomed himself. But Jack kept walking, Lyra at his side, the desert wind rising around them, and in that moment, he knew there was no turning back. The Iron Nomads had taken more than her mother. They had taken the last chance of mercy in a cruel world, but now, for the first time, they had drawn the eye of a human who refused to stay silent, and the wastelands would soon learn what it meant when a desperate plea was answered. The desert stretched wide before them, endless dunes rolling like waves of gold under the dying light of the suns. Jack walked with heavy steps, the sand crunching under his boots, while Lyra followed close, her little legs pushing to keep up. Every step carried the weight of a choice he could no longer undo. He had agreed to follow her, to chase the Iron Nomads into the wastelands. The market was long behind them, its noise fading, and all that remained was silence and the whistle of dry wind. Lyra's face was pale, her silver skin streaked with dust. Her small hands held tight onto the pendant at her neck. Jack watched her from the corner of his eye. Her eyes were swollen from crying but sharp with determination. She was only a child, but the way she walked, the way she refused to fall, showed strength beyond her years. Jack wondered how much fear she carried inside, how much pain it took to chase monsters into a desert alone. "Show me where," Jack reminded her softly, and she pointed across the horizon. "They took the path past my village," she whispered. "The fire is still there, you'll see it." Her voice cracked. But she kept walking, her steps never slowing. Jack tightened the strap of his rifle across his shoulder. It was old, scratched and heavy, but it was the only weapon he had. He wondered if it would be enough against machines that roared like thunder, and warriors who carried blades that cut through steel. By the time they reached the edge of Lyra's village, night had begun to fall. The smell of smoke filled Jack's nose before he saw the ruins. Charred huts lay scattered across the sand, walls broken, doors hanging, everything black with ash. A silence hung over the place, heavy, broken only by the sound of wind moving through empty homes. Lyra froze at the sight, her little chest rising and falling fast, her hands shaking as she pointed to the ruins. "There," she said, her voice tight. "They came with fire." With chains, Jack followed her through the wreckage, his boots stepping on burned wood and broken glass. He could see the trail, heavy marks pressed deep into the sand. They were not the steps of men, but of massive iron machines, treads as wide as doorways, and claw marks that dragged deep into the earth. The Iron Nomads had been here, and they had left a scar that would never fade. Lyra bent down and picked something from the sand. A piece of cloth, torn and burned. She held it to her chest, whispering, "This was my mother's." Her voice trembled, and for a moment she looked like she would break. But then her small jaw tightened. "She's alive," she said, almost to herself. "I saw them drag her. I saw them take her. They didn't kill her." "Not yet." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "Then we follow." The night deepened. Stars spread across the sky, sharp and cold against the black. The desert became dangerous. Shadows stretched long, and every sound made Jack's hand tighten on his rifle. Lyra stumbled once, her legs weak, and Jack stopped. Pulling a small ration from his pack, it wasn't much, just a strip of dried meat and water from a dented flask. He handed it to her, watching her eat slowly, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You should rest," he said, but Lyra shook her head. "If we stop, they'll go farther. We can't lose them," Jack almost argued. But the fire in her eyes stopped him. This girl was not asking him to carry her. She was asking him to keep walking beside her. So he did, step after step across the broken trail. The marks in the sand told their story clearly. The nomads had dragged prisoners behind their machines, chains cutting lines into the dirt. Every mark was proof of cruelty, and every mark pressed deeper into Jack's chest. He had seen many things in his wandering life, but this, slavery under burning suns, filled him with a new kind of anger. As they walked, a sound cut through the silence. The low howl of the wind, mixed with something heavier. Jack froze, pulling Lyra behind a broken wall of stone. In the distance, faint lights flickered on the horizon, moving, shifting. Lyra's breath caught. "It's them," she whispered. Clutching his sleeve, Jack narrowed his eyes, watching the lights crawl slowly across the desert, the glow of engines, the fire of their war beasts. The Iron Nomads were not far ahead. His heart pounded. This was no longer a trail. This was a chase. Lyra looked up at him, her voice small but filled with certainty. "We can still reach them, mighty human. We can still save her." Jack looked down at her, and though fear pressed on his mind, he nodded. "Then we keep going," he said, his words sharp as steel. The desert was no longer just sand and stars. It was a battlefield waiting to happen. Jack felt it. The weight of a fight he could not win, but also the weight of a promise he could not break. Every step toward those lights brought him closer to death, closer to the jaws of the Iron Nomads. But every step also carried the hope of a child who refused to let go. And as the night swallowed them, Jack knew the broken trail would lead not only to Lyra's mother, but to a storm that would change everything. The desert night stretched on, endless and dark, only the faint glow of the Iron Nomads' war machines flickering on the horizon. Jack and Lyra kept moving, their shadows long under the stars, their breaths heavy but steady. Every step felt heavier. Every gust of wind carried the smell of ash and iron. Jack knew he needed more information, more than a trail of lights in the distance. If they charged blindly into the nomads' camp, they would die before reaching the cages at dawn. They reached a small settlement hidden among rocks, houses built from clay and metal scraps. Lyra pointed nervously. "We can ask here," she whispered. "They will know about the nomads." But as soon as the villagers saw them, faces turned pale, shutters closed, and doors slammed. No one wanted to look at them. No one wanted to speak. Fear lived in this place like a second skin, and the very name Iron Nomads made people hide. Jack tried first with an old vendor sweeping dust from his stall. "We're looking for the Nomads trail," Jack said, his voice calm. The man's eyes widened in horror. He shook his head fast. "Do not speak of them. Stranger, the walls have ears. Their scouts ride even in daylight." He pushed Jack away and vanished inside, leaving only the echo of his warning. Lyra tugged Jack's sleeve, her voice trembling. "They are too afraid. They won't help us," but Jack did not stop. He tried again with a group of men carrying water jars. They lowered their eyes and walked faster, one of them whispering, "Human or not, if you chase them, you'll join the dead." Finally, an old woman, her back bent with age, stepped out from the shadows. Her eyes were cloudy, but her voice carried weight. "You walk a path of death, human," she said. "The Iron Nomads ride iron beasts with cannons that split mountains and blades that drink fire." Lyra clutched Jack's arm, but the woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your courage will not save you. They are more than men. They are storms made of steel." Jack's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. "Where do they take their prisoners?" he asked, his voice like stone. The old woman hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Lyra, who stood trembling but firm. "Finally," she whispered, "they ride east beyond the dunes to the ravine of ash, a place where the earth itself bleeds fire. No one returns." Her words hung heavy in the air, and before Jack could ask more, she shut her door, leaving them alone in the silent street. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide and wet. "Everyone is scared, even to speak their name," she whispered. "But you aren't. You'll still go, won't you?" Jack looked at her, at the fragile hope glowing in her eyes, and he nodded slowly. "I'll go," he said. "Because no one else will." They left the settlement, the wind rising behind them, carrying whispers that followed like ghosts. Every villager who saw them prayed in silence, some for their safety, most for their souls. The path to the ravine of ash was no ordinary road. It was a curse, a place where only the desperate or the doomed dared walk. As they moved, Jack could not shake the old woman's words from his mind. Iron beasts, blades that drink fire, a ravine filled with ash and death. It sounded less like an army and more like monsters born of nightmare. He glanced at Lyra, small, tired, but walking with her head high. She was the reason he kept going, the reason his fear had no chains to bind him. By midday, they found the Nomads' trail again, the sand broken with deep grooves of heavy machines. But this time Jack noticed something new. Bloodstains, dried and dark, mixed with footprints that staggered. He knelt, touching the ground. "They forced their prisoners to walk," he muttered, his hand curling into a fist. Lyra's face twisted in pain. "That means my mother is still with them." Her voice cracked, but her eyes shone with new fire. They kept walking until the sky began to burn orange. The sun setting low. That was when Jack heard it. Faint at first, then louder, carried by the wind, drums low. Heavy drums that thudded like the beating of 1,000 hearts. Lyra's hand gripped his tightly, her body shaking. "It's them," she whispered. "They drum before they camp." Jack pulled her behind a ridge of stone, crawling to the top and peering over. What he saw froze his breath. Dozens of massive machines rolled across the sand. Iron beasts with wheels taller than houses, their bodies covered in spikes and chains. Warriors in scarred armor marched beside them, carrying banners made of bone and steel. At the center, cages dragged behind engines, filled with prisoners whose cries were lost beneath the roar of the drums. Lyra spotted her mother among them, her small voice breaking. "There, Jack, there. She's alive!" Her hand shook so hard she almost cried out, but Jack pressed a hand over her mouth. "Quiet," he whispered. "They'll hear us." His heart pounded. He had found the Nomads, but seeing them was worse than imagining them. The strength of an army, the cruelty of beasts, and the fear they spread even without words. As the drums echoed, as firelight lit the horizon, Jack's eyes hardened. This was no longer a question of whether he could fight them. It was a question of how long he could survive against monsters that no one dared face. But in the silence of the ridge, with Lyra's trembling hand clutching his arm, he swore to himself he would not walk away. Not now, not ever. And as the night crept in, the whispers of fear around the desert grew louder. But Jack's silence was different. It was the silence before a storm. The night was cold, the stars sharp above the desert, and the glow of the Iron Nomads' fires burned like a warning on the horizon. Jack and Lyra stayed hidden behind the ridge, the sound of drums echoing in their chests. Each beat like a hammer of fear. They had found the enemy. But now came the hardest choice. Whether to step closer into death or turn back into safety. Jack's jaw tightened. He knew there was no safety left. Not for Lyra, not for her mother, and maybe not for himself. They waited until the drums faded, until the fires dimmed into embers, and then slipped away into the deeper dunes. The wasteland stretched before them, a sea of sand and stone where no birds flew and no plants grew. Only the wind moved there, carrying whispers of battles long lost. Lyra shivered, clutching her pendant, her little body trembling with cold and hunger. Jack handed her his coat, rough and torn, but it wrapped around her small shoulders like armor. "Why do they do this?" Lyra asked softly, her voice breaking. "Why take mothers, fathers, children? Why take everything?" Jack's steps slowed. He had no easy answer, only the truth. "Because fear keeps them strong," he said, his voice low, "and chains keep others weak." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes shining even in the dark. "But fear doesn't stop you," she whispered. "Why?" Jack didn't answer right away, his mind heavy with old scars. Finally, he muttered, "Because someone has to stand when everyone else runs. The wastelands tested them with every mile. The sandstorms came without warning, clouds of dust rising to blind their eyes and choke their lungs." Jack tied a strip of cloth over Lyra's face, guiding her with a rope tied to his wrist. They walked like shadows through the storm, sand biting their skin, thunder rolling above. At one point, Lyra stumbled, her small body sinking into the sand, but Jack pulled her up, lifting her in his arms until the winds calmed. Her tears mixed with dust, but she whispered, "I won't stop. Not until I see her." And Jack carried her until the storm ended. When the sands finally settled, silence returned. But the wastelands had changed. Jagged rocks rose from the ground like black teeth, glowing faintly with strange red veins. "The ravine of ash," Jack muttered, remembering the old woman's warning. The earth here looked wounded, cracks glowing with hidden fire, smoke curling from the ground like the desert itself was alive. Lyra clung tighter to his sleeve, her face pale with dread. "My mother is there," she whispered. "I feel it. They found signs of the nomads everywhere, broken chains left behind, scraps of food, trails of deep machine treads pressed into the sand." The closer they walked, the heavier the silence became. Jack felt it in his chest, like eyes watching from the shadows. At one point, he spotted movement on a ridge, a figure cloaked in black, armor glinting faintly. A scout. Jack froze. Pulling Lyra low to the ground, the nomad raised a horn to his lips. Ready to sound the alarm, Jack lifted his rifle, breath held tight, and fired. The shot cracked through the wasteland. The figure dropped, silent. The horn never sounded. Lyra flinched at the sound, her hands covering her ears. But when she looked at Jack, her fear turned into something else. "Trust, you saved us," she whispered. But Jack shook his head. "No," he muttered. "I just bought us time." They moved quickly, their pace faster now, every shadow feeling heavier, every rock a place where eyes might wait. The ravine of ash loomed ahead, a giant scar in the earth, glowing with hidden fire. Smoke rose from its depths, painting the sky with dark clouds. At the edge, they looked down and saw it, the Iron Nomads' camp, built into the ravine itself, fire pits blazing, machines resting like beasts, and cages filled with prisoners. Lyra gasped, her hands trembling. She's there, Jack," she whispered, pointing to one of the cages where a thin figure clung to the bars. Her mother alive. Jack's chest tightened, relief and dread twisting together. The camp was massive, guarded by warriors in black armor, their weapons glowing faintly in the firelight. Jack counted dozens, maybe more, all armed. Already, his rifle felt small, his body felt weak, but the fire in his heart burned stronger than the flames below. Lyra looked at him, her voice trembling. "You'll save her, won't you?" Jack's eyes stayed locked on the camp, his voice steady. "I'll try," he said, "with everything I have." The wastelands roared with fire and smoke, the Iron Nomads' camp alive with cruelty. Jack knew stepping into that place meant stepping into death. But the little girl beside him, the prisoner below, and the chains waiting to be broken made the choice clear. There was no turning back now. The wastelands had swallowed many lives before, but this time it would face something different. A human who refused to bow, and as the night deepened, Jack took his first step toward the ravine of ash. The storm of battle waited, and his story was only beginning. The ravine of ash burned with the glow of hidden fire, smoke rising from cracks in the ground like the breath of some buried beast. From the cliff's edge, Jack and Lyra looked down into the nomads' camp. A nightmare of iron and flame. Cages lined the pit, built of black metal, each one filled with prisoners, their cries lost beneath the roar of engines and the laughter of warriors. The air was thick with the stench of oil and ash, and the ground shook whenever the great war machines growled to life. Lyra's hands clutched the rocks until her knuckles turned white. Her eyes searching desperately there, she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's her." "That's my mother," Jack followed her gaze, his eyes finding the thin figure curled against the bars. The woman's silver skin was bruised, her hair tangled with dust, but her spirit was alive, her hands clinging to the cage like she was waiting, hoping Lyra's tears spilled, her voice cracking. "She's alive, Jack. She's really alive." Jack felt a knot in his chest. He had promised to help, but now the truth hit him harder. The camp was massive, warriors everywhere. The nomad's leader sitting high on a throne made from bones and steel. The chief was a towering figure, his armor scarred and dark, his face hidden behind a mask shaped like a beast. Every movement he made carried power. Every laugh of his followers was sharp with fear. This was not just a camp, it was a fortress. Jack pulled Lyra lower behind the ridge, his voice firm but quiet. "Listen to me, Lyra. You must stay hidden. If they see you, they'll use you against me." She shook her head, tears falling. "No, I can help, I can." Jack put a hand on her shoulder. "Steady but gentle. You helped me already. You brought me here, now let me do the rest." Her small hands trembled, but she nodded, whispering, "Please bring her back." Night deepened. The camp grew quieter. Warriors resting, machines cooling. Only guards left at the cages. Jack crawled down the rocky slope, each step silent, his rifle slung across his back, his hands gripping a stolen blade he had taken from the fallen scout. The closer he came, the more he heard, the prisoners whispering, chains rattling, guards laughing about how much the slaves would sell for. Jack's teeth clenched, his anger rising with every cruel word. He reached the first line of cages, shadows hiding him. The guards' backs turned. Inside the cages, faces looked up, pale eyes widening at the sight of a stranger who was not a nomad. One prisoner, an older alien man, whispered in shock. "A human," another hissed. "Fool, he'll die before dawn." But their whispers spread, like sparks across dry wood, hope flickering where none had lived before. Jack crept closer to Lyra's mother's cage, his heart pounding. The woman stirred, lifting her bruised face, her eyes meeting his. For a moment time froze, her lips parted in disbelief. Then she whispered a single word. "Full of both fear and desperate hope, Lyra." Jack pressed a finger to his lips, shaking his head. "She's safe," he whispered. "I'm here to get you out." Before he could cut the lock, a sound split the air, the heavy boots of a guard approaching. Jack slid into the shadows, the blade tight in his hand. The guard, a hulking nomad with jagged armor, stopped near the cage, kicking the bars with a cruel laugh. "Sleep, animals. Tomorrow you'll fetch a fine price." The prisoners shrank back, but Jack moved, striking fast, the blade sliding between the guard's armor. The man fell without a sound, and Jack dragged him into the shadows. Gasps filled the cage, hope mixing with fear. Jack whispered harshly, "Stay quiet or we all die." He pried the keys from the guard's belt, his hands shaking, every second stretching like eternity. The lock clicked open, Lyra's mother clutching the bars as if they might vanish. Her voice cracked. "Where is she?" Jack whispered. "She's safe, she's waiting." Tears streaked her face, her hands covering her mouth to stop her cries, but before Jack could move to the next cage, a horn blared sharp and loud, cutting through the night. His chest tightened. The nomads had discovered the dead scout from earlier. The camp exploded into chaos. Warriors shouting, drums pounding once more. Jack grabbed Lyra's mother's arm, pulling her free. "Run," he hissed, but there was nowhere to run. The nomads surged toward the cages, their leader rising from his throne, his masked face turning toward Jack. For the first time, their eyes locked, human and warlord. The nomad chief raised his weapon high, a massive blade glowing with fire, his voice booming across the camp. "A human dares touch my chains? Break him, tear him apart." The warriors roared, rushing forward. Jack's grip tightened on his blade, his body ready, his mind burning with one thought only. He had come too far to fail now. Lyra's mother clung to him, her voice breaking through the chaos. Please save her. Save Lyra. Jack looked at the cages, at the prisoners, at the army of enemies charging toward him. The fire in his chest blazed higher. He stood taller, his voice sharp as steel. I'll save all of you, the chains rattled. The camp roared, and Jack prepared to fight the impossible. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the clash that would decide life or death. The horn still echoed across the ravine of ash, loud as thunder shaking the walls of stone. Torches lit, engines roared, and the Iron Nomads swarmed from every corner of the camp. Their war cries cutting through the night. Jack stood with Lyra's mother at his side, one hand gripping the stolen blade, the other pulling her close. The prisoners cried out in fear, rattling their chains, some reaching through the bars as if he was their last hope. The Nomad chief stood high above on his throne of steel and bone, his masked face glowing in the firelight. His voice boomed like a storm. A human dares challenge us. Break him! Burn him! Dozens of armored warriors rushed forward, weapons raised, their boots thundering on the black ground. Jack's heart pounded. He knew he was only one man, but his blood burned like fire. He shoved Lyra's mother toward the shadows, his voice sharp. Hide, stay low, wait for me. She hesitated, her eyes wide with terror, but she obeyed. Vanishing behind broken stone, Jack turned back to the oncoming storm, his blade catching firelight, his rifle slung across his back. The first Nomad swung a chain blade at him, sparks flying as Jack blocked. The force sent him stumbling, but he pushed forward, driving his blade into the man's chest. The fight exploded, warriors crashing into him from every side. Jack swung wide, his blade slicing armor, his fists striking hard, every move filled with desperate strength. The prisoners shouted, banging against their cages, their hope rising with each Nomad that fell. But for every enemy he cut down, 3 more came, their weapons gleaming, their eyes burning with hatred. Jack backed toward the fuel drums stacked near the machines, his mind racing. He remembered the scout's fuel tank exploding when he had struck it. Now he saw his chance. He ripped his rifle from his back, aimed at the closest drum and fired. The shot cracked the night, the drum burst, and fire roared across the camp. Flames spread fast, leaping from one machine to another, turning the night into blazing chaos. The Nomads screamed as fire swallowed tents and engines, smoke choking the air. But even through the flames they came relentless, their chief watching from above like a predator waiting for the final strike. Jack coughed, his lungs burning, his blade slick with blood and oil. He ducked low, striking another guard, kicking him into the fire. Lyra's mother cried out from the shadows, her voice breaking. Jack! Behind you! He turned just in time, blocking a massive hammer with his blade, the force sending pain through his arms. The warrior pressed down, snarling behind his mask. Jack gritted his teeth, his muscles screaming, then shoved back with all his strength, slamming the man's head against a burning cage. The fire caught his armor, the warrior fell screaming. The prisoners inside cheered, their voices breaking through the chaos. Jack grabbed the keys from another fallen guard, his hands shaking as he unlocked cages one by one. Move! Run! He shouted, freeing as many as he could. The prisoners stumbled out, weak but alive, grabbing weapons from the dead. Hope spread like wildfire. The Nomads were strong, but now the slaves fought too. Chains turned into weapons, stones into hammers. The camp no longer silent but alive with rebellion. Still, the chief did not move. He stood above the flames, his massive blade resting on his shoulder, his eyes locked on Jack. It was as if he was waiting, watching, testing this human who dared challenge his rule. Finally, his deep voice cut through the fire. You think yourself mighty, human? You are only one man, Jack. Breathing hard, covered in blood and smoke, raised his blade high. One man is enough, he growled. The chief lifted his weapon, pointing down at him. Then face me in the fire. The Nomads pulled back, leaving a circle of flame and smoke. The freed prisoners gathered behind Jack, their eyes wide, their voices trembling. Lyra's mother clutched her chest, whispering his name like a prayer. Jack stepped into the circle, his blade ready, his heart steady. This was the fight he had been walking toward since the market. Since the little girl had grabbed his arm and begged him for hope, the chief leapt down from his throne, his massive frame shaking the ground, sparks flying from his armor. The firelight made him look like a monster born of the desert itself. He raised his flaming blade high and Jack braced himself. The two crashed together, steel against steel, fire raining around them. The sound shook the camp, prisoners and nomads alike watching in silence. Every strike was thunder, every block was lightning. The ground cracking under their feet, Jack fought with everything he had, his body screaming with pain, his muscles burning. The chief was stronger, heavier, every blow like a hammer. But Jack was faster, sharper, his fury and purpose driving him forward. Lyra's voice echoed in his mind, her small words, "You're my last hope." That memory gave him strength, pushing him past the pain, past the fear. The fight raged in the fire, sparks flying with every strike. Jack stumbled once, nearly falling, the chief's blade cutting deep into the ground beside him. But he rolled, struck back, and drove his blade into the gap of the chief's armor. The warlord roared, striking him across the chest, sending Jack sprawling into the dirt. Blood filled his mouth, his body heavy, but he forced himself up, his blade still in his hand. The freed prisoners cried out, shouting his name. The nomads pounded their weapons, chanting for blood, and in the heart of the fire, Jack stood tall again, his eyes locked on the towering chief, his voice steady. "This ends tonight." The flames rose higher. The desert roared with battle, and in that circle of fire and steel, the human and the warlord clashed once more, the outcome uncertain, the storm at its peak, and the fate of everyone hanging on the edge of a blade. The fire blazed high, smoke twisting into the night sky. The ravine of ash burned like the mouth of a volcano. Around the cages, freed prisoners fought with chains and stones, their cries rising with hope. The Iron Nomads clashed back, but their order had broken, their leader locked in combat with the human who refused to bow. Jack's arms ached, every breath cut like fire, his blade heavy in his hand. The nomad chief swung his massive weapon with the force of a storm, sparks flying whenever steel met steel. Each strike drove Jack back, his boots digging into the ash. But still he stood, still he fought. The chief's laughter echoed deep and cruel. "You bleed. Human, you weaken, give up." Jack spat blood, his voice raw. "Not while they still breathe." The clash shook the camp. Prisoners and warriors circling in silence, their fates tied to the duel. Lyra's mother clung to the bars of broken cages, her eyes wet, her voice a whisper, "Please, survive for Lyra." Jack heard her even over the roar of fire, and the words struck deeper than any blade. The chief lifted his weapon high, flames reflecting in his mask. He swung down with a blow meant to end it. Jack rolled aside, the blade slamming into the ground, the impact shaking the earth. Ash flew in every direction, sparks lighting the sky. Jack rose, his body screaming, and struck fast, driving his blade into the gap in the chief's armor. The warlord roared, staggering back, blood hissing against the fire. But he did not fall. With rage, he grabbed Jack by the throat. Lifting him high, Jack kicked, gasping. The world spinning, the chief's voice thundering. "You are nothing but dust, human, nothing but prey." Jack's vision blurred, but in the smoke he saw Lyra's face in his mind, her trembling hand on his sleeve, her voice begging, "Please, mighty human, you're my last hope." That memory lit a fire deeper than the flames around him. Jack gritted his teeth, forcing strength into his arm. His blade still clutched in his hand. With a final cry, he drove it upward, piercing through the chief's mask. The steel cracked, the roar turned into a scream, and the warlord fell back, releasing him. Jack collapsed to the ground, coughing, his chest burning, but his eyes locked on the sight before him. The great chief of the Iron Nomads, staggering, falling to his knees. His fire dimming, the camp froze. Silence louder than battle. Nomads stared in disbelief, their leader bleeding in the dirt. The prisoners' cries rose into shouts, hope turning into fire in their chests. One voice called, then many, "The human! The human stands!" The freed slaves rushed forward, their chains swinging, striking down the nomads with fury. The balance shifted, fear no longer chained them. Jack forced himself up, leaning on his blade. His breath ragged, he raised his voice, hoarse but strong. "They are free. No more chains. No more fear." The prisoners roared back, their courage spreading like the fire that burned the camp. The nomads faltered, their strength breaking without their leader. Some fled into the night, their engines roaring as they vanished into the dunes. Others fell beneath the fury of those they had once enslaved. The chief tried to rise, his broken mask revealing eyes full of rage. But Jack stepped forward, pressing his blade against his chest. "This ends tonight," he whispered, and with one final strike, the leader of the Iron Nomads fell silent forever. The fire died slowly, smoke curling into the night. The cages lay broken, the chains shattered. the ground covered with ash and victory. Lyra's mother stumbled forward, her face streaked with tears. She fell to her knees beside Jack, whispering, "Thank you, human." "Thank you." Jack only nodded, too tired to speak, his chest heaving with every breath. Then a small cry rang out and Lyra appeared from the shadows. She ran past the broken machines, her feet stumbling, her eyes wide with fear and hope. "Mother," she cried, and the woman turned, arms opening. Lyra threw herself into her embrace, sobbing. "I thought I lost you." Her mother held her close, whispering, "Never again, my little star." Never again. Jack watched, his heart heavy but full. The reason he had fought standing right before him. The prisoners gathered around, their voices soft with awe. One whispered, "The mighty human," another said. "He broke the nomads." Jack shook his head, his voice low. "No, you broke them. I only lit the fire." The night faded into dawn, the first light touching the ravine of ash. The survivors began to climb out. Leaving the camp in ruins, Jack stood on the ridge, watching the desert stretch endless before them. Lyra came to his side, her small hand slipping into his. "You saved her," she whispered, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You saved all of us." Jack looked down at her, a tired smile on his face. "No, Lyra," he said gently. "You saved her because you never gave up." The desert wind rose, carrying the smell of smoke and freedom. The Iron Nomads were broken, their fear scattered, their chains shattered, and in their place stood the memory of one choice, one promise kept by a human who had nothing but courage. The story would spread, carried from village to village, whispered in markets and camps of the little girl who begged for hope, and the human who answered the desert would never forget, and neither would the stars.